Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. The hallway light was off, but the kitchen bulb kept blinking like it was unsure whether to give me away. I didn't move. I didn't cough. I didn't even blink. From where I stood, I could see just enough. Her back facing me, her hand holding the phone to her ear, and her voice, lower than I'd ever heard it before. "No, he's asleep. He never notices anything anymore," she whispered. Then laughter. Not the kind you fake. Not polite. The kind that curls around your ribs and makes your hands shake when it's not meant for you. I pressed my palm to the wall. I wasn't supposed to be awake. She thought I'd taken my sleeping pill. I had, but I spit it out under my tongue when I heard the floor creak. Something told me to stay alert. Something had been telling me that for weeks. I stood there for 2 more minutes, then 3, and then I heard her say it clear as anything. "You're everything he's not." I didn't break. I didn't yell. I just walked back to the bedroom like a ghost. Lay down. Faced the window. Eyes wide open. I counted the cars passing by, one by one, like maybe I could count my way out of the grief building in my chest. That night I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and planned. At 4:13 a.m., I folded 3 shirts, 2 pairs of pants, and 1 sweater. I didn't take a suitcase. I didn't want to make noise. I left my wedding band on the edge of the sink next to her silver earrings, the ones I bought her 2 birthdays ago when she still kissed me with both hands on my face. I didn't take the keys. I didn't leave a note. I didn't even charge my phone. At 5:02 a.m., I stepped out the front door barefoot. The floor was cold. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From clarity. No fight. No noise. No storm. I gave her the house. The cars, my silence, my absence, and finally peace. I didn't have a destination. That was the point. I walked 3 blocks before realizing I was still holding my toothbrush. The absurdity of it made me laugh, quietly, dryly, like some tired man who just escaped from a fire carrying a spoon. I tossed it into a trash bin behind a bakery and kept walking. The air was cold enough to sting, but I welcomed it. After months of emotional numbness, even discomfort felt like a blessing. I passed lit-up windows full of sleeping houses and wondered how many other men were inside, lying awake next to women they no longer recognized. At 6:10 a.m., I found a bus station. I bought the cheapest ticket to anywhere. The woman behind the glass didn't ask questions. I think she saw it in my eyes, that look of someone who's not running to something, but from everything. I sat in the back row of the bus and stared at my reflection in the window. I looked like someone else already, or maybe like myself for the first time in years. That thought alone broke something open inside me. By mid-morning, I arrived in a town I didn't know. No plans, no bags, just the clothes I left with and a crumpled $100 bill I'd hidden behind a picture frame for emergencies. I guess this counted. I wandered until I found a diner, the kind with sticky booths and coffee that tasted like regret. I sat in the far corner and finally checked my phone. 10 missed calls. 2 voicemails. No texts. That felt intentional. She wasn't worried I was hurt. She was just shocked I had the spine to leave. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I deleted them both without playing a second. Then I powered off the phone and slid it across the table like it might burn me. I stared at the empty seat across from me, the place where she used to sit and tease me for ordering the same breakfast every time. It felt like that version of us belonged to another couple. A happier one. A fake one. Around noon, I checked into a motel using a name that wasn't mine. I stood under the shower for 27 minutes, counting each second, as if cleansing the weight of every night I fell asleep wondering if I was the only one in love. When I lay down, fully clothed, I realized I hadn't cried. Not once. Not even when I walked out. Maybe I didn't need to anymore. Maybe when someone slowly breaks you over time, the tears dry up before the leaving even begins. I slept for 10 hours straight. No dreams. Just silence. Beautiful, perfect silence. I woke up disoriented. The motel room smelled like bleach and someone else's regret. The air conditioning was stuck in Arctic mode, and my fingers felt stiff from the cold. But I didn't move. For the first time in a long time, I had nowhere to be, no one waiting for me, no performance to keep up. I lay there with my eyes open, staring at the water stain on the ceiling, trying to remember what peace felt like before it started to feel like loneliness. I thought I'd escaped, thought I'd feel free. But freedom has a sharp edge when you've spent years shrinking yourself for someone who never even asked you to. I finally rolled over and powered my phone back on. It took longer than usual to boot up, almost like it was resisting the idea of re-entering my old world. Notifications poured in. More missed calls. One text this time. Just one. Where are you? No punctuation. No emotion. Just 3 words that held no apology, no panic, not even a pretense of concern. I stared at it for a while, as if the meaning might change the longer I looked. I didn't reply, not because I wanted to be cruel, but because I knew that message wasn't about me. It was about her control slipping. She wasn't worried about me. She was worried about what it meant if I finally stopped accepting crumbs. I got up and walked to the small table near the window. The motel coffee was terrible, but I drank it anyway. Outside, the world was moving like nothing had changed. A teenager on a bike, an old man sweeping a shopfront, a woman walking a 3-legged dog, all of them strangers, all of them safe from the kind of ache I was carrying. I wondered if any of them had ever walked away from a life without a single fight, without screaming, just silence so loud it threatened to choke them. Later that afternoon, I wandered into a bookstore, not because I needed a book. I just needed to be surrounded by words that didn't lie. I picked up a battered copy of Mice and Men and sat in the corner for over an hour. No one bothered me. That was the first time I realized how invisible I'd become, and how peaceful that could feel when it wasn't weaponized by someone who once claimed to love me. Back in the room, I finally listened to one of the voicemails. Just one. Her voice came through shaky, but not soft. Not the voice I remembered from Sunday mornings or whispered apologies. It was sharp, impatient. You're being ridiculous. You can't just vanish. I need to know where you are. This isn't like you. She was right. It wasn't like me. The old me would have sent an "I'm sorry" text before I even reached the sidewalk. But this version of me, the one sitting on a motel bed with cracked wallpaper behind him, didn't owe anyone anything anymore. Especially not someone who could talk about him like he was furniture. I deleted the voicemail. Then I deleted her number. For the first time, it didn't hurt. I hadn't spoken a full sentence to another human in nearly 3 days. That thought hit me while I was pouring myself another bitter cup of motel coffee, wondering how long I could exist like this before disappearing completely. I liked the anonymity, sure, the blankness of this place, this room, the lack of mirrors. No expectations. No questions. But something about that silence started to shift. Not in a haunting way. More like the air was warning me, they're coming. It happened on a Thursday. I'd walked to a nearby laundromat, watching my clothes tumble in the dryer like they were trying to escape too. I sat alone in the corner reading from the same book I'd carried around like a shield. Then I saw the woman. Mid-50s, dressed too nicely for this neighborhood. Leather shoes, pearl earrings, large sunglasses even though it was overcast. She stood at the entrance for a while, just scanning faces. Then she spotted me. I didn't move. I knew who she was before she even said a word. Eldon. Her voice was careful. Not shocked. Not angry. Just cautious, like you'd approach a wounded animal. I thought it was you. I closed the book without marking the page. Hi, Corinne. My wife's sister. Of all people. We hadn't spoken directly in years. Not out of dislike. Just because Corinne always had the strange ability to look through me rather than at me. She walked over, sat down. As if this were a planned lunch and not a confrontation in a place that smelled like detergent and grief. She's losing it, she said plainly. She doesn't know where you are. She keeps asking if I've heard from you. I told her I hadn't. Then why are you here? I asked. She looked around the room like she didn't want to answer. Then she leaned in, voice lower now. Because I think you need to hear what she said 2 nights ago. I came over to check on her. She was drunk, slurring, angry, pacing the living room. She didn't know I was in the hallway. I felt my heart slowing. Not racing, just slowing like it was listening carefully. She was on the phone. I don't know who with, But I heard her say, I didn't think he'd actually leave. He was always so weak. I figured I had more time. Corinne paused. I looked at the floor. My body didn't react. No heat, no tears, just a strange, cold click inside me, like a final lock sliding into place. I'm not here to bring you back, she added. But I thought you deserved to know. We sat in silence for a few more minutes. The dryer buzzed. I stood up and opened it, pulling out my now warm clothes. As I folded them, Corinne watched me with a mix of pity and maybe admiration. Couldn't tell. She never deserved you, she said finally, her voice soft but steady. I think some part of her always knew that. I didn't respond. I just nodded once, picked up my folded clothes, and walked past her toward the exit. I didn't owe explanations. Not anymore. But as I stepped back into the cold, wet air outside, I realized something. It wasn't just about leaving her anymore. It was about becoming someone I never gave myself permission to be. I spent the next few days pretending I was still invisible. I took walks at dusk with my hood up. I paid in cash. I didn't speak unless someone asked me a direct question. But inside, something had shifted. Not like a man finding clarity in the mountains or whatever cliché people write songs about. No, it was smaller, sharper. Like realizing a door you thought was locked had always been open, you just never turned the handle. For the first time, I didn't think about her constantly. Instead, I thought about who I might have been if I hadn't spent the last few years trying to be easy to love. Whatever that even means. But the quiet didn't last. It was just after 7 p.m. I had made the mistake of returning to the same diner for the third time that week. I liked the corner booth. I liked the flickering neon sign outside the window. I liked that the waitress, an older woman named Joan, never asked questions but refilled my coffee like clockwork. I thought maybe I could fade into this life. But people always notice eventually, no matter how small you try to make yourself. I was halfway through a grilled cheese when I heard the voice behind me. Sharp, familiar, and unwanted. You've got to be kidding me. I froze. Not from fear. From something colder, like recognition laced with regret. I turned around slowly. There she was, Maribel, hair pulled back, expensive coat, wide-eyed like she'd just seen a ghost who owed her money. You're actually hiding out in a place like this? She said, loud enough that a few people turned. What are you doing, Eldon? Playing some kind of dramatic game? I didn't answer. I looked at Joan instead, nodded once. She got the message. She stepped toward our table and said to Maribel, either you sit and speak respectfully or you leave. We don't do shouting here. Maribel gave her a glare that could melt steel, then slid into the booth across from me. I've been looking for you, she said, voice lower now but still carrying that practiced venom. I know, I said. She looked surprised that I wasn't groveling. She expected me to apologize, to explain myself, to beg for understanding. That's what the old me would have done. I came to get closure, she said, resting her chin on her hand. I deserve that much. I nearly laughed. You don't come looking for closure in a town you don't belong in unless you're scared the story's out of your hands. What's that supposed to mean? You don't want closure, I said quietly. You want control. And you lost it the second I walked out that door without needing to make a scene. Her expression flickered. For a second, I saw something close to real emotion. Not regret, not love, but maybe the sinking realization that I was finally past the point of letting her decide what I felt. I made mistakes, she said, suddenly switching gears. But you weren't exactly a husband of the year. I nodded. You're right. I wasn't. I was worse. I stayed. Even when I knew you didn't love me anymore. I stayed and shrunk myself every day so you wouldn't have to feel guilty. Her mouth opened, but no words came. I stood up slowly, took a few bills from my wallet, and dropped them on the table. You can tell whatever story you want when you go back, I said. But you don't get mine anymore. And I walked out of the diner into the cool night air, the smell of rain and coffee still lingering in my coat. I didn't look back, not even once. The next morning, I woke up to a thin strip of sunlight cutting through the motel blinds. My mind was surprisingly calm, like it had finally stopped spinning after weeks of chaos. I made coffee, sat by the window, and tried not to think about last night, about Maribel sitting across from me, pretending she wanted closure while digging for control. I told myself I'd seen the last of her. I wanted to believe that, but deep down I knew better. People like her don't give up easily. They just change tactics. I walked to a nearby hardware store, bought a cheap notebook, and started writing. Not about her. About me. It felt strange, like borrowing my own voice for the first time. I wrote about the small things, the color of the sky the day I left, the sound of my own footsteps fading behind me, the exact moment I realized that leaving didn't mean failure. I filled 10 pages before I stopped. It wasn't healing. It was something different, proof that I could still create something out of the wreckage. Later that afternoon, while eating lunch at the same diner, Joan handed me an envelope. "She dropped this off," she said softly, her eyes apologetic. "Said you'd want to see it." For a moment I considered walking it straight to the trash. But curiosity has a cruel pull. I opened it right there. Inside was a photo, our wedding picture, and a short note in her familiar handwriting. "If you ever decide to stop running, you know where home is." The word home hit harder than I wanted it to, because it wasn't a home. It was a memory that had worn out its welcome. I slid the photo back into the envelope and tore it in half without reading the rest. I didn't feel anger. I felt light, like every lie she told had finally run out of oxygen. When I left the diner, Joan called after me. "You heading somewhere new?" "Yeah," I said. "Somewhere without ghosts." I walked to the bus stop and sat down, watching the traffic move. I didn't even check the schedule, just waited for the first bus going anywhere else. For the first time in years, I didn't care about destinations. I cared about movement, the idea that forward was enough. As I waited, I pulled the notebook from my bag and wrote a single line on the first clean page. Sometimes disappearing is an escape. It's self-rescue. Then I closed it, exhaled, and smiled faintly. The bus pulled up a few minutes later. The door hissed open, and I climbed aboard without looking back at the motel, the diner, or the life that almost convinced me I was powerless. The road ahead was quiet. Not empty quiet. And for the first time, that silence didn't scare me. It felt like freedom finally learning my name. The bus ride was quiet, just the way I liked it. The kind of quiet that didn't demand anything. I watched unfamiliar towns blur past the window, each one a little softer than the last. I didn't know where I'd get off. I wasn't counting stops. I just waited for a place that felt like it hadn't heard my story yet. A blank page. By late afternoon, the driver called out the next stop, Riverton. I'd never heard of it, but something about the name sounded untouched, unassuming. I stepped off the bus with nothing but my backpack and a notebook full of thoughts I hadn't yet shared with anyone. Riverton was small. 2 diners, 1 barbershop, and a grocery store that smelled like dust and lemon cleaner. I walked until I found a rundown inn with a flickering neon vacancy sign. The woman at the desk didn't ask questions. Just handed me a key and slid a local map across the counter with a smile that said she'd seen plenty of men like me before. Quiet, hollow, searching. I spent the next few days settling into the rhythm of being nobody. I bought coffee from the same corner shop every morning, sat in the park for hours with my notebook, and let the world pass around me. No one knew my name. No one asked where I came from. And I started to believe, maybe for the first time, that I didn't have to explain myself anymore. Then came the bookstore. It was hidden on a side street, barely bigger than a garage, but something pulled me in. The bell above the door chimed softly as I stepped inside. And there she was, not Maribel, not Corinne, but someone I hadn't seen in 12 years. Eldon. Her voice was soft, stunned. I blinked. Briar. Of all the places, of all the people, Briar was the girl I almost married before I met Maribel. We'd broken things off gently, without betrayal or heartbreak, just the ache of 2 people headed in different directions. I hadn't thought of her in years. And yet, here she was, behind the counter of a forgotten bookstore, looking at me like I just crawled out of a dream. "I can't believe it," she said. You look different. I feel different." We talked for an hour in the corner of the store, the scent of old paper wrapping around us like warmth. I didn't tell her everything, but I didn't have to. She read it on my face, in the way I paused before answering, in the slight tremor in my hands when she touched my arm. When I finally stood to leave, she reached into a box behind the counter and handed me a blank leather journal. "Start fresh," she said. "This town's good for that." That night, I sat on the windowsill of my room at the inn, staring out at the dark trees beyond the road. I opened the new journal and wrote one sentence. I wasn't lost. I was just never given the space to arrive. And for the first time, I believed it. 3 weeks passed in Rivorton before I realized I hadn't thought about Maribel in days. Her voice, once a permanent echo in my head, had faded into silence. The sharp edges she left behind dulled with each sunrise. I still kept the journal Briar gave me, and by now I had filled over half of it. Not with pain, but with moments. Small things. The sound of the river near the bookstore. A dog that always waited outside the bakery. Briar's laugh when she misquoted a poem and refused to admit it. We weren't a couple. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But there was comfort in knowing someone remembered me before I disappeared. Before I became the man who gave everything away just to hear his own thoughts again. One afternoon, I walked to the post office and mailed a letter. No return address. No signature. Just a few lines written in that same worn-out journal. "You were right. I was weak, but not in the way you think. I stayed too long. I kept choosing you even after you stopped choosing me. That's over now. There's no anger left, only distance. You can keep the house, the cars, the silence. I'm keeping my peace." It wasn't for her. It was for me. A full stop at the end of a sentence I'd let drag on far too long. That evening, Briar and I closed the bookstore together. She handed me a cup of tea and sat across from me, elbows on the counter, watching the rain streak down the windows. "You're not the same man I used to know," she said gently. "I hope not," I replied. "That man was always trying to earn love. This one knows he doesn't have to beg for it." She smiled. Not a romantic smile, just something kind and human. So what now? I didn't have a dramatic answer. No big dreams. No declarations. Just one truth I could finally speak with certainty. Now, I stay. That night, I slept without waking once. No thoughts chasing me, no weight on my chest. Just quiet. This time, not the suffocating kind, but the soft kind that feels like breathing for the first time in years. Thank you for joining us for Eldon's story. Now we want to hear from you. What moment in this story hit you the hardest? Was it the phone call, the diner confrontation, or the quiet choice to begin again? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Right here on Reddit Confessions.